You're tuning into Creepy Time, where we bring you chilling creepy stories and eerie urban legends To support Creepy Time, please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments so we can discuss the story together. Now, let's dive into today's tale. Rules of work at nursing homes. There are moments in your life that carve themselves into memory so deeply, they never really leave you. You don't always know it at the time, but years later, you can still feel them like the echo of a scream in an empty house. For me, that moment was the day I first walked into Sunset Manor. I was 26, fresh out of nursing school, still had creases on my scrubs and a stethoscope I barely knew how to use properly. After months of job hunting and unpaid internships, I got a call from a place I'd never heard of, a long-term elder care facility just outside a town called Ashburn Hollow, Pennsylvania. You won't find it on most maps. One of those places where Main Street still has a post office, a diner, and a church, and that's it. The job paid better than I expected, had benefits, and came with an on-site apartment if I needed it. Sounded like a dream. But dreams and nightmares aren't so different at first glance, are they? I showed up on the first crisp morning of fall. You know that smell in the air when the trees are just starting to give up and the ground still holding on to the last warmth of summer? That kind of morning. Sunset Manor stood at the edge of a wooded hill surrounded by pines and silence. A big 3-story building painted a soft yellow that had long since faded. It didn't look like much. More like an old high school than a healthcare facility. Still, there was something off. It wasn't just the quiet. It was the way the windows all seemed to look outward, like eyes not inviting you in, but watching you, judging you. At the front door, I was greeted by the head nurse, Susan Maddox, late 50s, short, no-nonsense type, with a voice like she'd smoked through 2 divorces and didn't regret either one. "You, Emily?" she said, eyes flicking over my ID badge. "Yes, ma'am." She gave me a brisk handshake. "We've been expecting you. Come on in." The lobby was clean but sterile, pale green walls, plastic plants, that faint hospital smell, disinfectant, and something else, something sour under the surface. Susan walked me through the basics. 38 residents, mostly aged 70 to 90, some fully lucid, others deep into dementia. "This place isn't exciting," she said, "which is exactly how we like it." I nodded and smiled, pretending I wasn't already overwhelmed. I was trying to keep up, scribbling mental notes, patient charts, med rounds, emergency procedures. But one thing stuck with me more than anything she said that day. "There's one staff member you'll want to meet early," Susan told me as we turned down a second-floor hallway. "She's been here longer than anyone, knows the residents better than their own families." And that's when I met Martha. She was cleaning the railing of the hallway staircase. Wearing the standard issue gray uniform, her silver hair pulled up into a neat bun. From a distance, she looked like any other elderly caregiver. But as we got closer, something didn't sit right. There was no sound coming from her movements, no cloth brushing wood, no footsteps, not even the usual rustle of fabric when someone moves. She didn't just move quietly, she moved without sound, as if the air didn't even register her presence. "Martha," Susan called, "come meet our new nurse." The woman stopped what she was doing and turned toward us, slowly, methodically. Her eyes were pale gray, not cloudy like cataracts, but clear, sharp, almost too light, like frost over water. She looked at me, or maybe through me. "Nice to meet you," I offered. She smiled, just a small one, but it didn't reach her eyes. It wasn't polite or warm. It was the kind of smile you give to someone when you already know something about them they don't. "Welcome to Sunset," she said. Her voice was quiet, scratchy, and oddly deep for a woman her age. We moved on, but I couldn't shake the feeling I just walked past a ghost who hadn't realized she was dead yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I told myself it was nerves, First days are always overwhelming, new patients, new routines, new co-workers. But lying in that too quiet apartment above the rec room, I kept hearing echoes in my head, not voices, more like footsteps, soft, deliberate, just outside the range of sound. The next few days were uneventful. I shadowed Susan, learned how to navigate the building, got to know some of the residents. There was Mr. Franklin, a retired science teacher who loved crossword puzzles. Mrs. Hughes, who spoke as if she were still living in 1961 and waiting for Kennedy to call her back. They were sweet. Some forgetful, some sharp as ever. But every so often, I'd see Martha, moving from room to room, never in a hurry, always just appearing, like she'd materialized rather than walked in. I started noticing a pattern. She only visited residents when no one else was around, and afterward, something about those residents would change. It was subtle at first. Mr. Franklin stopped doing his puzzles, said they didn't make sense anymore. Mrs. Hughes began confusing the names of her children. Then she forgot she had any children at all. At first, I chalked it up to the nature of the job. People decline, that's why they're here. But it wasn't that simple. It was too fast, too targeted, and it always followed a visit from Martha. One afternoon, I brought lunch to Mr. Weller, a former Air Force mechanic who once spent hours telling me stories about rebuilding F-4 Phantom engines in Guam. That day, he was quiet, staring out the window. "Everything okay?" I asked. He looked at me with a blank expression. "Did I serve in the military?" he said. I froze. You don't remember?" He shrugged. "Not sure. Doesn't feel like something I'd do." The next day, I found a model jet that used to sit on his nightstand shoved in a drawer. He didn't recognize it, said it must belong to someone else. That's when I started keeping notes. Nothing official, just a personal log of what I was seeing. Changes in memory, behavior, all of it following Martha's visits. I didn't want to believe what I was thinking, but the evidence kept piling up. It wasn't just dementia, it wasn't natural, it was targeted. I reached out to a former classmate of mine, Jillian, who worked in a memory care unit up in Rochester. I didn't give her names, just scenarios. I asked, "Have you ever seen patients lose specific memories like full identities, careers, hobbies in just a few days?" She paused for a long time before answering. "Not without a major trauma or a neuro event. But if you're seeing that, be careful, Em. That's not normal." I wanted to dismiss it, tell myself I was imagining things. But then one night, just before my shift ended, I saw something I'll never forget. I just finished checking on Mrs. Dutton when I passed by Mr. Weller's room. The door was cracked open, the lights dim. Inside, Martha stood over his bed, one hand on his chest, the other gently pressed against his forehead. Her eyes were closed, her lips moved silently. I froze. She looked like a priest giving last rites. But what chilled me most was the way Mr. Weller was smiling, not peacefully, but eerily, like someone in a trance. Then I saw it just for a moment, the faintest shimmer in the air above him, like heat rising off asphalt, and something moved inside it, something that looked like a face. I stumbled backward, knocked over a cart in the hallway. When I looked back through the door, she was gone. The room empty except for Mr. Weller, asleep, and the air ice cold. I didn't tell Susan, I didn't report it. I just went home, locked the door, and stayed awake until dawn. That was the night I stopped thinking of Martha as a nurse and started thinking of her as something else entirely. If you've ever worked in long-term care, you know there are patterns. The early risers, the sundowners, the ones who ask for pudding after every meal, and the ones who insist it's still 1,972. After a while, the unusual becomes routine, and the strange becomes just part of the background. But this was different. The pattern I saw didn't feel like dementia. It felt selective, like someone was choosing which pieces of people to erase, carefully, intentionally. The strongest parts of them, their joy, their pride, their identity, started going dark, one memory at a time. And always, it came after Martha visited. I started keeping a chart, not an official one, nothing digital, nothing that could be traced, just a notebook in my car. I listed the residents in one column, and next to each name, I tracked dates, behaviors, changes. It didn't take long before the pattern became undeniable. Residents like Mr. Franklin, who could quote Hamlet and solve New York Times crosswords in ink, stopped speaking in complete sentences. Mrs. Harris, a former jazz pianist who once played a perfect version of Autumn Leaves on a dusty upright in the rec room, suddenly couldn't remember what a piano was. Mr. Ramos, a retired aerospace engineer with a wall full of photos from Cape Canaveral, lost all recollection of ever leaving Pennsylvania. The common thread? They were all vivid, people who had lived lives full of complex memories, rich with detail, and now those details were bleeding away. You want to believe that memory fades like film, slow, grainy, inevitable. But this wasn't slow, it was surgical. And Martha, she was always nearby. I'd find her humming in the hallway, standing just outside the room after a spell or folding linens in eerie silence. It was almost like she was waiting for the moment their minds gave way. One night, I stayed late, not for work, but because I needed to see it for myself. I had asked for the evening shift, told Susan I was fine, covering for a sick aide. Around 11 p.m., I found an excuse to linger in the East Wing. That's where Mr. Franklin's room was, the one who had once told me about teaching Shakespeare to 8th graders in Philly public schools. He could still recite lines from Macbeth even on his bad days. Or at least he could. That night, he was different. When I checked in, he was sitting upright in bed, staring at the wall. "Hey, Mr. Franklin," I said softly. "You need anything?" He turned slowly. His face was blank, not confused, just vacant. "What's Shakespeare?" he asked. My throat tightened. "You don't remember? You used to teach it." He blinked. "I was a teacher?" I sat down in the chair across from him. "Yeah, you told me about it. Dozens of students. You once said a kid named Harris stole your copy of Othello, and you caught him by quoting Iago until he confessed." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Don't think that was me." I reached into my coat pocket. I had brought something that night, one of the old paperback editions he'd given me from his closet. Inside the front cover, he'd written his name, Arthur Franklin, room 212, property of Sunset Manor. I handed it to him. He looked at it, touched the pages, then slowly shook his head. "That's a nice book. Do you remember writing your name in it?" "Number. Do you remember your name?" Long pause. "Arthur?" Silence. "Mr. Franklin?" He blinked again. "That doesn't sound right." That's when I heard it, the softest sound behind me. A breath, maybe, or fabric brushing a doorway. I turned. Martha stood in the hall, arms crossed, watching. I stood up. "You scared me." She tilted her head. "You're not assigned to this hall tonight." I was just checking on him. She looked past me at Mr. Franklin, who was now looking at the window with glassy eyes. "He's peaceful," she said. "Let him be." Then she turned and walked down the corridor, her footsteps somehow making no noise at all. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I confronted Susan. "Can I ask you something weird?" I said. Susan was reviewing shift schedules. sipping lukewarm coffee from a mug that said, "Don't make me use my nurse voice." "Always a good way to start a conversation," she said without looking up. "Do you know Martha's last name?" She paused. "Sure, it's, She trailed off. That's when her brow furrowed. I leaned in. "Exactly." Susan looked up at me. "She's been here forever. Before I started, before even Joan, who was here in the 92nd, everyone just calls her Martha." "Does she have a personnel file?" "Probably." "Can I see it?" She gave me a look. "Why?" I didn't answer. Later that afternoon, she called me into her office, closed the door behind me. "I looked," she said. "There's no file, nothing recent. The last signed document with her name on it is from 2006, and it's a supply inventory, not payroll, not a tax form, not even a clock-in record." "So she's not being paid?" "No digital trail, no insurance, no W-2, just Martha." I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. "She always just shows up," I said. "She's never sick, never takes breaks, she doesn't eat. I've never even seen her blink." Susan folded her arms. "What are you saying?" "I don't know, but something's wrong here. And the residents, they're losing pieces of themselves, fast." "You're overworked," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm not imagining it." "No," she admitted, "you're not." That's when she told me about what happened to the previous night nurse. Her name was Janine Clark, late 32nd, had worked there for nearly 5 years. One day last spring, she clocked out and never came back. No goodbye, no notice, just gone. "Did you call her?" "Voicemail." "Family?" She had none listed. "What did Martha say?" "She said she didn't know her well. Said Janine kept to herself." "But you said she worked there 5 years." Susan nodded slowly. "Exactly. That was the beginning of what I started calling the harvest pattern. It wasn't random, it was targeted. Only certain residents were being visited by Martha repeatedly, those with dense memories, people who lived lives full of art, science, history, skill, people whose minds held story. And Martha was harvesting those stories. Not for research, not for medicine, for something else. I didn't know what, not yet, but I knew she wasn't doing it alone. It was a few nights later when I met Sarah, or rather, when she met me. I was in the break room, staring into a vending machine, trying to decide if peanut butter crackers counted as dinner. She sat down next to me, didn't say a word, just handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "You've been watching her," she said. I opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. It was faded, taken in front of what looked like an old farmstead. 3 figures stood in front of a wooden house: a teenage girl, a woman in a bonnet, and an elderly man. The teenage girl was unmistakable. It was Martha. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she said, "There's a reason the place is called Sunset, the end of light, the fading of memory. She's not a nurse, she's the night itself. Some truths hide in silence, others write themselves down and wait. Ra's diary was the second kind." The night she handed me that envelope with the photo, something shifted between us. Before that, Sarah had always been quiet, reliable, and professional. One of those aides who kept to herself and never missed a day. I'd always assumed she was just tired or shy. Now I realized she'd been watching too. After our brief conversation, she slipped away like she always did, quiet, unnoticed. Later that night, when I went back to my apartment above the rec room, I found a small cardboard box sitting just outside my door. No label, no note. Inside was a leather-bound journal, worn, soft with age, edges curled from handling. Tucked inside the front cover was a piece of notebook paper, folded in half. One line, written in neat cursive, "She took my mother's memories, but not mine. I wrote it all down before she could. Sa-ra." I read the first few pages standing in my doorway, coat still on. The 14th of March. Mom started forgetting things 2 weeks after Martha started spending time with her. Not little things, big things, whole decades. My birth, my father's funeral. I told the head nurse, but she said it was probably early onset dementia. I know my mother. I know her better than anyone. This isn't natural. The 22nd of March. She called me by a stranger's name today. Then she screamed. Said she was trapped inside her own head. Said Martha locked her in the wrong room. That night, she slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke up, she didn't recognize me at all. The 26th of March. I follow Martha. She goes into rooms late at night, sits with the patients, doesn't talk, just touches their foreheads. Sometimes they twitch, sometimes they cry, sometimes they smile. But not in a good way. I saw her mouth moving like she was whispering something, but no sound came out. The 3rd of April. Found something strange in the basement. A locked room near the old boiler. Smelled like sulfur and rain. I heard voices behind the door, dozens of them, all whispering at once. I ran. I haven't told anyone. The 7th of April. I think she's not just stealing memories. I think she's keeping them. Somewhere. The 14th of April. Mom died this morning, but before she did, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't let her take you too." I sat on the floor, diary open on my lap, reading page after page until sunrise. Sarah had documented everything. A slow descent, her mother's unraveling, Martha's patterns, even her own efforts to hide her memories, to fake confusion when Martha was near, to act forgetful. She wrote that she kept her memories in writing, scattered across dozens of notebooks she stashed around the facility, behind tiles, inside ceiling panels, under floorboards. She called them her anchors, pieces of herself she left behind in case Martha ever tried to reach inside. That morning, I found Sarah in the laundry room. She was folding sheets with her usual quiet precision. The smell of bleach was strong. "I read it," I said softly. She nodded. "I figured you would. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" She looked up at me, eyes tired but clear. "You weren't ready. And now? Now you see it too." We started working together, quietly, carefully. I helped her collect the anchors, pages, notes, photographs, anything with truth. We documented everything. Resident names, their memory declines, dates, times, who Martha visited, and what changed afterward. We mapped it all out. And we found the center. A hallway in the east wing, old and mostly unused, where the walls had warped from time. The lights flickered there more than anywhere else. Martha passed through it often, but no one else ever lingered. Behind a rusted utility door marked storage was a narrow staircase leading downward. Susan said the basement was off limits, not up to code. But Sarah said that's where her mother once followed Martha, and is where she heard the voices. We waited until a stormy Tuesday night, perfect cover. Power flickered, backups kicked in. Most of the residents were asleep. I stole the keys from the supply closet. We crept past the East Wing nurses' station and slipped through the utility door. The stairwell was steep and damp, carved out of old stone, probably left over from whatever building stood here before Sunset Manor. At the bottom, a small landing led to another door, this one newer, metallic. A keypad lock had been removed, wires dangling from the wall. When we pushed it open, the air hit us like a wall, heavy, wet, and bitterly cold. What we saw inside still haunts me. The room wasn't large, but the ceiling stretched higher than it should have. The walls were lined with wooden cabinets, some with glass windows, like antique apothecary drawers. Inside each one, a swirling mist lit from within floated in suspended animation, glowing, shifting. There were hundreds of them, each labeled with a name and date. Some names we recognized, residents who had passed. Others we didn't. Some dated back to the 1942nd. A few were handwritten in old ink, faded but still legible. And in the center of the room, on a pedestal, sat a thick leather-bound book. I opened it carefully. Inside, memories, page after page of lives written in exquisite detail, not just facts or journal entries. These were first-person accounts, as if someone had become the people they were writing about. Felt what they felt, knew what they knew. "This is how she does it," Sarah whispered. "She doesn't just erase them, she absorbs them, she feeds on them." Suddenly, the air shifted, grew colder. The door creaked behind us. Martha stepped into the room. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Not fire, not rage. Memory. The weight of lives. The burden of stolen time. She didn't yell, didn't rush toward us. She simply said, "You shouldn't be here." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Sarah stepped forward. "You took my mother." Martha tilted her head. She was ready. "No," Sarah said. "You made her ready. I gave her peace. You took her life." Martha's expression didn't change. "I offer sanctuary, release. The world forgets them. I remember. That is mercy." I stepped beside Sarah. "They didn't choose you." "I don't need their choice," Martha said softly. "I need their story." Then she raised her hand, and the room began to spin. It felt like falling, but I was standing still. The room, the cabinets, the mist, the pedestal blurred at the edges, and my chest tightened like all the air had been vacuumed out of the space around me. I tried to blink, to move, to speak, but every word caught in my throat like static. Martha's hand was still raised, though she hadn't moved a muscle. Her expression was calm, not menacing, almost reverent, like a priest before communion. Beside me, Sarah gripped my arm. "She's trying to pull you in," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't let her in your head." Easier said than done, because someone was already whispering there. Not in words, not exactly, more like impressions. Smells, sounds, memories that didn't belong to me. A chalkboard and dusty floors, the clack of a typewriter, a kiss under a football bleacher, the pain of childbirth, the gunshot of a war I'd never fought, a vinyl record playing Otis Redding, a bottle breaking on linoleum, then a voice my own echoing from nowhere. I remember all of them, I just don't know which ones are mine. Sarah pulled me back hard, her fingernails digging into my wrist. It broke the trance. We ran. Not far, just around the corner of the long basement wall, but it was enough to sever whatever invisible thread Martha had cast. For now, we ducked behind a metal support beam and crouched. My heart thundered in my ears. I wasn't just scared, I was disoriented, like I'd come back from somewhere I hadn't meant to visit. I looked at Sarah. She was pale, shaking. "I saw things," I said, barely able to get the words out. "Whole lives." She nodded. "That's how she feeds. She pulls you in, shows you the best parts of someone else's life, wraps you in it like a blanket, and then," she snapped her fingers, "you're gone." "Gone how?" She takes your story, makes it part of hers, and you forget. You stop being you. Somewhere in the chamber, we heard the quiet creak of a cabinet door closing. She wasn't chasing us. She didn't need to. She knew we would come back. That's how she worked. She let people fall in love with the idea of memory. Let them taste someone else's nostalgia, grief, joy, until they couldn't tell where they ended and the past began. That's when she harvested. The next morning, we made a decision. We had to destroy the room. But not just the room, the book, the cabinets, the mist, everything. It was the only way to stop her from collecting again. Sarah had a plan, and it involved the old boiler room, which was connected to the chamber through a narrow corridor sealed off years ago after a small fire. She'd found the blueprints in the county archives when she was researching the Taylor family. The boilers hadn't worked in years, but the pilot systems and gas lines had never been fully removed. If we reroute the gas and create an ignition source, she said, we don't just burn the room, we erase it. What if we're in there when it goes? She looked at me. Then we don't forget. For the next 2 days, we prepared. We mapped a path to escape, timed it to the minute, hid fire accelerants behind the cabinets, wired a makeshift spark system using old heater coils and a portable battery. I don't know how it all came together: adrenaline, desperation, faith, and fear. A lot of fear. Every moment we spent near that room, we felt her. Sometimes in the hallway, sometimes in our dreams, sometimes in each other's voices. Sarah started to forget words, just small ones at first, then dates, faces. One afternoon, she couldn't remember the name of her mother. She cried in the linen closet. "I'm slipping," she whispered. "She's pulling me." I held her hand. "You won't forget," I said. "I won't let you." We chose a Sunday night. Midnight. Storm approaching. All the right ingredients. As we made our way down the stairs one last time, I felt strangely calm. The kind of calm you only get when you know everything's already in motion. You're not steering anymore. You're just a passenger. The door opened without a sound. The room looked the same. Cabinets full of lives. The book still on the pedestal. Martha was there. She wasn't surprised. She never was. She turned to us slowly, her voice low. "I offered you peace. You offered theft," Sarah said. "I preserve," Martha replied. "I remember them when no one else will." "You erased them." Martha stepped closer. "They wanted to be remembered. Isn't that what we all want? To live beyond the body? I gave them that. At the cost of their souls," I said. "They gave them freely." "No," Sarah said. "You tricked them." "You think your version of memory is better?" Martha's tone sharpened. "All dust and photos, all pain and fading. We think it's real." I stepped forward. "And it ends. That's the price of being human." She paused, then smiled and whispered, "Then be human." The lights flickered. We ran. Sarah flipped the gas valve behind the central cabinet. I yanked the coil switch from my coat. We gave ourselves 60 seconds. Martha didn't chase us. She just stood there, touching the pages of the book, mouthing silent names as we fled. We turned the corner, reached the base of the stairs. Then we heard it. A low hiss. The spark caught. A sound like thunder cracked beneath us. The ground shook. Heat bloomed through the stairwell like the breath of a dragon. Smoke curled up behind us. Ash followed. Screams not ours echoed from the stone. Voices, dozens of them. Some pleading, some laughing, some singing, then nothing. It's strange. the way fire settles memory. For days after the explosion, the smell lingered in my clothes, smoke, and scorched paper, like something ancient had burned, something not meant for flame. The official story was simple enough. An electrical fire in an old wing, minor damage, no residents harmed, no one mentioned the basement, no one spoke Martha's name. I didn't ask questions. I didn't have to, because those of us who saw it, we already knew what burned. They never found a body. Not in the chamber, not in the stairwell. Nothing of Martha remained, just melted cabinets, blackened stone, and the smell of memory gone to ash. The mist had evaporated. The book had turned to cinders. All that was left were names, some I remembered, some I could no longer place. Sarah said maybe that was the point. Maybe forgetting was part of healing. But I wasn't so sure. Something changed after that night, not just in Sunset Manor, but in me. My dreams became heavier. Sometimes I'd hear voices in the middle of the night, fragments of stories that didn't belong to me. I'd wake up reciting lines from someone else's childhood. I'd taste foods I'd never eaten, smell perfumes I'd never worn. For a while, I thought maybe Martha had left a mark on me, that maybe I'd inhaled too much of her essence, and now pieces of her library lived in my chest. But over time, it faded, or maybe it integrated. I don't know. What I do know is that I started to carry people differently after that. I listened more closely, I watched for patterns, I paid attention to what others forgot. Sarah stayed at the facility a little while longer. Then, one day, she left. No goodbye, no forwarding address, just a single envelope left in my mailbox. Inside was one of her mother's memory anchors, a page torn from a notebook. On it, a recipe for banana pudding in perfect cursive. At the bottom, her mother had written, "You always said it didn't taste like home unless we burned the edges." It made me cry. I don't even like banana pudding. But that's the thing about memory. It doesn't ask for your permission. It just arrives. It settles inside you. And if you're lucky, it leaves something behind. I kept working at Sunset Manor for another year. Things improved. Residents stabilized. New nurses were hired. The East Wing got remodeled. The old stairwell was sealed for good. Most people never knew what had happened, but a few did. One night, Mr. Franklin came up to me while I was setting up dinner trays. He looked at me sideways and said, "Do you remember that story I used to tell you? About the kid who stole Othello?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "You quoted Iago until he confessed." He laughed. "God, that's right." Then he looked down. I thought I'd lost that one. I smiled and said, "You got it back." He looked at me, eyes glassy. "Thanks." He didn't say for what. He didn't need to. Later, I went back to the spot where the utility door used to be, just a blank wall now. I touched it, cold, solid, gone. And yet, I still heard her sometimes in the hum of the fluorescent lights, the whisper of laundry carts, the rhythm of a name being said too many times. I wondered if she was truly gone, or if Martha was just another memory now stored in someone else waiting to be awakened again. Maybe that's the danger of remembering too much, or maybe it's the blessing. Years passed. I left Ashburn Hollow, moved to Oregon, started working at a hospice in Eugene. Different people, same stories, different names, same ache. I kept a notebook in my coat pocket at all times, wrote down fragments, phrases, recipes, dreams. I never tried to explain it to anyone, but I knew why I was doing it. It wasn't to remember. It was to protect memory, to keep it somewhere safe, somewhere real, somewhere that no one, not even someone like Martha, could touch. Because the truth is this: memory is sacred and dangerous. It defines us, connects us, and when someone takes it, whether by disease or time or choice, they take part of who we are. But if someone saves it, writes it down, says it aloud, holds it close, then they become a keeper. a lighthouse, a witness, and that might be the most powerful thing a person can be. So if you're hearing this, if this story made its way to you, know that you're one of us now. You carry it, you remember, you're a witness. And that means Martha can't win. Not this time. Not again. We live in a world where forgetting is easy, where the past gets buried under deadlines, distractions, and data. But memory is more than nostalgia. It's identity, it's lineage, it's power. When we remember, we don't just honor the past, we protect it. And when we listen deeply to the stories of those around us, our elders, our loved ones, even strangers, we become caretakers of something sacred. So remember what matters. Record what you can. Tell your story. Tell their story. Because someone, somewhere, will need it when everything else fades.